This video is sponsored by Balesa. Stay tuned for details about our giveaway. Sia might actually, in some sort of bizarre roundabout way, be the reason why I have an autism diagnosis and therefore the reason why I'm sitting in front of you today. Part 1. What happened? So it's 2021, everyone's favourite year, that's sarcasm, but it's the cold, dark February of 2021 and pop star Sia releases her directorial debut. Well, not really, because she did also co-direct some music videos, not entirely without controversy either, but this gave her the courage to kind of step sideways into movies.
I thought, oh, well, how hard can it be? It could just be like making a music video, but every day for 40 days.
And so, in the cold, dark winter of February 2021, Sia releases a musical about autism, and that musical was called Music. And it went down really, really well, actually.
So fantastic, so moving, so beautiful.
Astonishingly moving, heartwarming film. Beauty, love, understanding. This portrayal of an autistic person was very real. Family and friends, love for each other's story. Lovely item, apparently. Captured greatly. Life, love. Nope, that's sarcasm again. While these were real things said by real people, the overall consensus on the film was not great. It did win 3 Golden Raspberries. It has a 3.2 out of 10 IMDb score. It has a 7% Rotten Tomatoes, and it has a 15% audience score. Against my better judgment and against the recommendation of numerous people in my audience who are like, no, don't bother, I watched the movie for the first time. I did feel like it was kind of a rite of passage, you know, for somebody who wants to comment on autism representation and autism in the media, you gotta watch Music. I brought my non-autistic husband along for the journey. He watched it with me, and his review was, it's like 107 minutes of the faces you make in the bathroom mirror when you're drunk. Before I share my thoughts, I want to say thank you so much to Balesa for enabling me to chat about this with you today. Balesa are a sexual wellness brand, and they're on a mission to enable everybody who wants to embrace, explore, and celebrate their sexuality. Of course, that should include autistic adults and disabled adults in general. So if you sign up using the link below, you will receive something from them, whether it's a gift card to use towards your purchase or a free vibrator. I really love their products. They've really helped me to improve my relationship with my own body. I had a pretty tough few years, feeling really low about myself because of a few different health issues, including endometriosis. But even with chronic pain or disability, if you get creative, if you try things like toys, hopefully you'll find that you are still able to have great experiences. I'm going to tell you about a few of their best-selling toys. The Flutter Vibe is a new one in this lovely lilac colour that kind of matches with my pathological people pleaser earrings, and that person we're pleasing is ourselves. It's designed for dual stimulation and precision. This is the Pebble. You can control suction and vibration independently, and there are also no annoying pattern modes. Fits in your hands super nicely as well. And this one is my personal favourite. It's the Demi Wand, and it works for all body types. It's super quiet, and the flexible neck gives you full control over angles and pressure as well. They're waterproof, fully submersible, and you charge them in the cases as well, which is super handy. If you do want to enter, click the link in the description, put your details in, and see what you get. You may as well. Music did come out 3 years ago, so if you need a recap, or if you're lucky enough to have been able to dodge the film entirely, like I did until a few days ago, then here's a summary of the plot. So we have Music, a mostly non-speaking, high support needs, young autistic woman who lives with her grandmother. They share an apartment together. They don't seem to come from a super wealthy background. Now Music needs to adhere to a very strict routine and do the same thing every single day. But luckily the entire neighborhood is very clued in and over the moon to help her every single day. Which, and you know, like maybe I'm just a shriveled up, cynical little raisin, doesn't seem that believable to me. The whole opening sequence feels a bit like a Disney movie. The little town full of little people is waking up to say bonjour, you know? Maybe that's what Sia was going for, I'm not sure. Music goes out on this walk every single morning and people stop to greet her. Every day the man at the kiosk presents her with clippings connected to her special interest. A young man pays for her to get a slice of watermelon, you know, like everybody around her is sugary sweet. Nothing is ever too much trouble for anyone. And I'm sure most autistic people watching this, and also people who support autistic people, can attest to the fact that this is not what most autistic people experience when they step out of their front door. Maybe it should be. Maybe that's the true autism acceptance that we're hoping for. I don't know. I know it's a musical. Maybe it's supposed to be a little bit over the top, but it doesn't happen like in song. It happens, you know, in an acted sequence. It does feel like a missed opportunity to touch on the misunderstanding that many autistic people, particularly autistic people who are higher support needs, are greeted with when they do leave their front door. At the start of the movie, the grandmother mother dies, and that means that Music's sister, called Zoo, who she hasn't seen for a very, very long time, who has just got out of prison, who is a recovering alcoholic, who is also a drug dealer, Zoo must come and look after Music. Zoo is played by Kate Hudson, and she's our true main character here, evidenced by the fact that Kate Hudson won the Golden Raspberry for Worst Actress, whereas Maddie, the actress who plays Music, she won the Golden Raspberry for Worst Supporting Actress. So you can maybe tell from that this isn't a film that necessarily centers autistic people, it's kind of more about the people supporting the autistic person. So Zoo really doesn't want to care for Music, and she doesn't know how to look after her. And the movie is her kind of figuring it out, of course, with lots of help from the neighbours, who are all very, very well aware of Music's care plan, which again feels super unrealistic in this individualistic society that we all live in. No money has been left for them by the grandma, so Zoo must continue to sell drugs. Even by the end of the movie, the financial side of things is never resolved, so I guess Zoo is just gonna have to continue selling drugs forever. I guess that's the resolution. Again, it could have been a great opportunity to highlight the financial struggles of people who, are full-time carers for loved ones. Will there be any social support available to them? Will Zoo be able to receive any respite care? I'm sure the neighbours will be more than happy to help, so I suppose she doesn't need it. Music and Zoo get a support dog at the end of the movie, so I guess that solves everything. Everything's okay. The main criticism of the film is that Music is a caricature of an autistic person. Someone said it is deeply reminiscent of the exaggerated mannerisms non-autistic people often employ when bullying autistic and developmentally disabled people for the ways we move. The fact that Ziegler, who plays Music, is not autistic, and the fact that her performance is so heavily exaggerated turns the entire movie into one long display of mockery. I know that wasn't Sia's intention, but it doesn't make things any easier to stomach. Music is played by Maddie Ziegler, who is not autistic herself. She was chosen for the role because she is a long-time collaborator of Sia's. She's been in many of her music videos, including Elastic Heart, the one that's a little bit controversial. Sia refers to Maddie as her muse.
We loved working together so much and it was magic when we did, that she ended up being my full-time muse.
She stated that she wrote the movie with Maddie in mind for the role.
I needed someone who was versatile and able to dance to the degree that Maddie dances, and I wrote it with her in mind.
Sia not only wrote this movie with Maddie in mind, but she also wrote it with Rain Man and Forrest Gump in mind. Apparently, she wanted to make Rain Man and Forrest Gump the musical.
I wanted to make it like the old movies, that like Forrest Gump and Rain Man, and I short described this movie as Rain Man the musical.
Sia helped prepare Maddie for the role by watching movies with her. They studied Leonardo DiCaprio's performance in the 1993 movie What's Eating Gilbert Grape, and Maddie also watched YouTube videos of autistic people. Maddie said, "I realized every single person is so special in their own way. That's how Sia and I came up with Music, her mannerisms, and her own thing going on." And I think the concerning thing there is that she says that's how Sia and I came up with Music. So two people with very little knowledge about autism came together to create a high support needs autistic character. You can kind of see where things went a bit wrong. They don't mention going out to meet real autistic people. They don't mention having focus groups with autistic people. Sia does mention basing the character of Music on the non-speaking son of one of her friends.
Your character is based on a real person that I know, and I'm teaching you all of his utterances and all of his tics, and as accurate a representation as that I know.
But of course, knowing one single autistic person, and who knows how well she even knew this person, that isn't enough. It was clearly not enough. And basing your 2021 movie on other now dated Hollywood movies that depict disability in a way that would likely not hold up to scrutiny if they were released today, it just seems like a recipe for disaster. It wouldn't have taken Sia many Google searches to discover that the autistic community has mixed feelings about movies like Rain Man. But did she even think to research what the autistic community thinks about these movies? Was that even on her radar, that autistic people themselves might have thoughts about their own representation? And also, if she had looked a bit deeper, she might have seen, what a huge impact movies like Rain Man have had on the autistic community, what a huge impact they still do have on how the general public sees autistic people and the stereotypes that they have in mind. Representation really does matter. Someone said on watching the movie, autistic people are used to this, but somehow it's still a shock to see it played out on the big screen. Ah yes, this is what people think of us. But then again, Sia did say that she wanted to make an old school movie.
I wanted to make an old school movie.
So I guess mission accomplished. The thing is, a lot of old school movies would not hold up to scrutiny if they were released today. We feel like we've moved on. As I say, Maddie unfortunately received the worst supporting actress Golden Raspberry for the role, and it's kind of sad because Maddie did express concerns about offending the autistic community and got quite upset while she was on set.
And Maddie arrived and she was living across the road from me at the time. I could see something was wrong with her. She was pale and she was just unlike herself. And I was like, honey, what's wrong? And she just burst into tears and she just said, I don't want anyone to think that I'm making fun of them. And I was like, oh, honey, like, I won't let that happen. I was like, I promise I won't let that happen.
It seems like both Maddie and Sia did have some awareness that they needed to be careful with this role. And they were super relieved when, before the movie's release, Maddie's performance was rated 100% by the Child Mind Institute.
When we sent it off to the Child Mind Institute to see whether we'd done a good representation, Maddie scored 100%.
Wow.
Both of us cried on that day.
It does seem a little bit like they were both kind of crossing their fingers and hoping it would slip through. But the autistic community didn't agree with the Child Mind Institute. The autistic community asked, why Sia had not chosen an autistic actress for the role. Sia claimed that she had, but the environment had been too stressful and therefore she'd felt like it was more compassionate to use Maddie for the role.
And that was based on a friend of mine. And we tried to do it together, but it was actually too stressful for him. And I tried with a girl as well, and it was too stressful for her. I chose to use Maddie because I thought at the time that was the compassionate thing to do. So I thought I was doing the right thing.
But this is confusing because, as we heard earlier, she said that she'd always had Maddie in mind for this role. She'd written it with Maddie in mind. One autistic person on Twitter said, several autistic actors, myself included, responded to these tweets. We all said we could have acted it on short notice. The fact of the matter is zero effort was made to include anyone who is actually autistic. And then Sia infamously replied, maybe you're just a bad actor. Having an autistic person play an autistic character greatly reduces the chance of it being insulting. Chloe Hayden plays an autistic character on the TV show Heartbreak High. And it definitely seems like the writers of the show work quite closely with Chloe to create, an authentic, faithful portrayal. And also by not casting an autistic person, it feels a little bit like you're saying that an autistic person would not be capable, they would not be able to handle it, which then sends out another hurtful and also harmful message about autistic people. And I mean, just a little bit of research will show you that the employment stats for autistic people are really dismal. For the show Extraordinary Attorney Woo, the main character, who is autistic, is played by a non-autistic Korean actress. And, there are mixed feelings about that show, but I think overall a lot of people are quite happy with her portrayal and they do see themselves in her portrayal. It can be done.
실존 인물이라든지 어떤 다른 캐릭터들을 모방할 생각은 애초에 접어두고 저만의 방법으로, 저만의 방식으로 책들을
But anyway, Sia wrote several more defensive tweets which further alienated her from the autistic community. She was clearly upset, and I really don't think she did set out to offend anybody. I think she thought she was doing a really good thing. I think it must have probably been quite a shock to her.
We're trying to show love for all of the caregivers and for all of the people on the autism spectrum, that this movie is for them.
I don't think she's a mean person. I think she had an outdated kind of inspiration porn inspired view of disability. Inspiration porn being when people who are not disabled look at a disabled person and go, wow, if they can do it despite all their ailments, I can do anything too. And, kind of use that person's disability to inspire themselves. Oh, music has so many struggles, but she still manages to bring everyone together, the whole neighborhood. Wow, how inspiring.
There's this wide-eyed innocence of this character, music, that in times like this is almost like so radically different, and it's so just feels so nice, like let's get back to that.
Pure, it's a pure.
Yeah.
And that's what I've always found with the special abilities people that I've fallen in love with, is this purity.
Sia refers to autistic people and disabled people as having special abilities, which I think most people would find pretty infantilizing. But you know what? I'd probably be just as defensive as Sia seems in her tweets if I had been trusted with a budget of $16 million and had only returned $600,000. That's gotta be pretty difficult.
And I was sick with fear. I thought I'll just pay the $16 million back to Warner Brothers and I'll just put it on the shelf.
Another major issue with music, perhaps the major issue with music, is the restraint scenes. There are 2 scenes within the movie where music is held down during a meltdown. The movie refers to them as seizures and episodes for some reason, but they're meltdowns. People often seem to get these terms mixed up, which again shows not an awful lot of research was done. But yeah, you often hear like stimming, meltdowns, episodes, seizures, tics, all kind of get a bit mixed up. You see it a lot on the fake disorder cringe subreddit that I respond to sometimes. It's like, I don't know, people who are not autistic are just like, oh, just general terms of disordered behavior, we'll just use them interchangeably. Those are weird things that those autistic people do, but they're all like different things. Some of them are words that we just don't use. Like, what is an autistic episode? Have you had an autistic episode recently? I guess every day in my life is a new episode of Autistic. In the movie, it is meltdowns that she's experiencing. I have a video talking all about autistic meltdowns if you would like some more information about them. And during both of Music's meltdowns, somebody climbed on top of her and held her down. First of all, it was a neighbor, because of course it was. These handy neighbors that are always lying around. And this guy gets on top of her and says, and I quote, "I'm crushing her with my love." And then by Zoo herself, Music is held down prone this time in a public park. A few months before the movie was released, the BBC published this article in which the use of restraints, particularly prone restraints, against disabled people is labelled human rights abuse. Prone restraint should not be happening in any kind of planned way and could result in serious injury and potentially death, which it has done on numerous occasions. In Music, restraint is very much presented as like the solution to the problem of Music's disordered behavior. You know, whenever she's acting up, lie on her, get her on the ground. Why couldn't they have demonstrated showing compassion?
Empathy, compassion, like, I don't know, just good vibes.
Moving Music away from the triggering stimuli, protecting Music. Instead it was, oh, the park got too noisy for you. Quick, let us pin you down on the ground as quickly as possible. I do really fail to see how Sia thinks these scenes constitute a love letter to the autistic community. As Sia said when she did apologise, her research was not wide enough and was not thorough enough. As Jessie Gender included in their super in-depth video about the movie, which I definitely recommend, I think Sia just wanted to make a movie about an issue. The first line of the song that she wrote for the credits says, "World, I want to leave you better. I want my life to matter." I feel like the autistic community came second to ego.
It was like my ego really wanted to be seen as like I'm a good director.
I think Sia had a lot of people around her saying yes and telling her that she was amazing and everything she came up with was genius, simply because she is good at making music. As in her songs, you know, not music. The movie. That was another thing that my husband said when he was watching it. Like, it feels like she has too many yes men around her. Like, how did nobody say, maybe we should stop? Nobody questioned it. That's what it seems like. And somebody really needed to question it at some point during the process. But I mean, it took a long time to get this movie out, and there was criticism as soon as the trailer was released. In fact, a lot of the criticism I've spoken about came from the trailer of the movie. People were criticizing the movie before it even came out. I guess maybe there is pressure from the studio, etc., but I don't know. I feel like maybe at that point they should have taken a step back and reconsidered and not released the movie as scheduled. Sia did say 2 people were fired for negativity on set. I wonder what that means. I wonder what they did or said. What was this negativity?
We're trying to show love for all of the caregivers and for all of the people on the autism spectrum, that this movie is for them. And if we can try and keep our egos out of it, that would be great. If you have a problem, please come to me. I only had to fire 2 people. And as soon as anyone brought a bad vibe, I was like, you're fired.
Very soon after the movie was released, Sia said that she planned to remove the restraint scenes from all future printings. She also said that there would be a warning label at the start of the movie. But if the scenes were removed, why would we need a warning label? I'm not sure why she suggested both were going to happen. And it seems like neither have actually been done. About a year ago, there was this post on Reddit. 2 years later, Sia's music still has the harmful restraint scenes, despite her promising to edit them out. And then when I watched the movie, and you can currently watch it for free on Amazon with ads, both of the scenes were still there in the movie at the following timestamps. There is no warning to be found at the start of the movie either. Maybe this isn't Sia's fault. Movies are huge projects that involve loads of people and a lot of money. Maybe there was nothing she could do. Maybe there were contracts involved, etc., etc. But don't promise it on Twitter as part of your apology. If anyone has ever seen a version without the restraint scenes or a version with the warning message at the start, maybe if you have a physical copy for some reason, maybe you do. I don't know how you spend your money. I'm not going to judge, but certainly it isn't difficult to find the movie with those dangerous scenes still in. And you might think, well, maybe she just couldn't remove them because it would have messed up the plot a little bit. And as I say, the restraint is kind of presented as, you know, the main solution, the main thing that Zoo learns. But I mean, as reviewers have pointed out, it doesn't really have that much of a plot anyway. It feels a little bit chaotic and all over the place anyway, so I'm not sure it would matter. And it's definitely, you know, the lesser evil, a movie that makes a bit less sense versus presenting a dangerous method of dealing with, in quotation marks, autistic meltdowns. There was also a bit of confusion as to how much Autism Speaks was involved in the movie. Autism Speaks is a very controversial charity within the autism community. Sia must have at some point mentioned that they were involved in the movie and then kind of backtracked it when she learned that, you know, a lot of autistic people aren't super huge fans of Autism Speaks, because she has this tweet where she says Autism Speaks came onto the project 4 years after the film was finished, and she had no idea that it was a polarizing group. But then Autism Speaks came out and said Autism Speaks were not involved in the casting or production of the film. So they were definitely involved somehow. I don't know what they did. They did something, whether they just watched it and approved it, I don't know. In the end, Sia actually closed down her Twitter account, and she has since reported that the whole situation really negatively affected her mental health. She has struggled with addiction in the past, she relapsed, she went to rehab, she thought about not wanting to be here anymore, which is obviously horrible. The impact of this amount of backlash must have been really, really hard to deal with, even if, you know, a lot of it was valid criticism. But then last year, there was a little bit of a plot twist. Part 2, what happened next? So what happened next? Sia revealed that she herself had been diagnosed autistic. In 2022, author Eric Michael Garcia responded to a tweet about Sia struggling with her mental health, stating that he didn't care, basically. Your movie portrays something that kills #actually autistic people, and autistic people begged you to be more considerate, and instead you chose to intentionally insult them. And I get that it kind of maybe felt like, you know, Sia was making herself the victim in this situation, and it felt frustrating, but I don't think I would ever personally go as far as to say I didn't care about Sia's mental health. You know, no matter how bad the movie was, and obviously there could be very negative consequences if people kind of watch the restraint scenes and think, okay, well that's okay, and that's how I'm going to deal with my autistic child or my autistic family member. But then in response to Michael, the comedian Kathy Griffin came to her defense, and she said Sia has been diagnosed with being on the autism scale herself. What is the autism scale? Can I go somewhere to have my autism weighed? Is that a thing? And then Kathy implies that because many men who are not autistic have played autistic characters before, this must simply be misogyny from Michael. But then Michael says, no, I think most of those portrayals of autism are trash too, which I think, you know, many autistic people would agree with that. And a lot of these portrayals of autistic people are not even portrayals of autistic people. Like, we know the guy that Rain Man was based on was not actually autistic, and with Forrest Gump, he was just supposed to have a lower IQ from what I've seen online. Like, there was never any specific disability. It wasn't, you know, this is an autism film. But about a year ago, Sia opened up about her autism diagnosis herself. She appeared on this podcast that was connected to this reality TV show called Survivor. Sia has said for many years that she spends most of her time watching TV. She seems to often find herself quite drawn to particular reality TV shows. Maddie herself actually started out as a reality TV star. She was on Dance Moms. In this instance, Sia had particularly related to one contestant who was diagnosed with ADHD and had also battled with addiction herself.
We have an amazing surprise guest for you here, Carolyn.
It's Sia Furler. I'm on the spectrum and I'm in recovery and whatever. There's a lot of things. But I mean, I felt like for 45 years, I was like, I've got to go put my human suit on. And only in the last 2 years have I become fully myself. The kook in me recognizes the kook in you.
So a lot of people, when they heard this, were very quick to say, like, this is not an excuse. This is not an excuse for the movie. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the video. Like, does her being autistic constitute a good excuse or not? But I did notice some people questioning the diagnosis, perhaps just suggesting it was her just trying to, you know, worm her way out of taking responsibility for making the movie. I know this sounds very incriminating, but I think she may just be saying this either for attention or to try and deflect criticism for music away from her. I feel like she's just using this last-minute diagnosis to shut people up about her lateral ableism. I'm personally very much against neurotypicals treating autism and other neurodivergent conditions like a costume or role that can be taken on and off freely. Those who have neurodivergent issues as part of their lives never get any breaks from struggling with said conditions. Now, I have a couple of videos reacting to the fake disorder cringe subreddit. I really hate that place. I really do not like people taking it upon themselves to police the validity of someone else's diagnosis, even when that person is Sia. I don't see it as productive at all, but if we were gonna do that, I think it makes sense that Sia is autistic. I don't see any reason to doubt her at all, other than just, you know, you don't like her and you don't want her to be. Sia fits the profile of a late diagnosed autistic person. She was open about her bipolar disorder diagnosis, which she later revealed was a misdiagnosis. And while it is possible to have both, many autistic people are misdiagnosed with mental health conditions before they're diagnosed autistic, bipolar being a relatively common one. Before she was diagnosed autistic, she was diagnosed with CPTSD, complex PTSD, which is something that a lot of autistic people are diagnosed with, and it also has some overlap with autistic traits as well.
Because it turned out I'm not bipolar, Louie. I have PTSD, complex PTSD.
And in 2019, 2 years before the movie's release, she revealed that she had EDS as well, which is a connective tissue disorder which has been linked to being autistic or being neurodivergent. She's also always been very open about her battles with addiction. That's what the song Chandelier is about. She has also said, as misguided as it might be, that she feels like she has some affinity for disabled people, and it often, you know, does sound very infantilizing.
I've always, I don't know why, but I've always had a thing for special, and they're called special abilities now, not special needs. Yeah, people with special abilities.
But maybe she feels safer around other disabled people. She maybe feels like she doesn't need to mask. Maybe she does feel like she can relate to certain things. I also think her relationship with Maddie, which is quite controversial, it's not something I want to go into super in depth in this video because I don't know, I'm not them, I don't know the situation. It also might explain the fact that Sia wants to work with Maddie again and again on projects and has said in the past she doesn't want to work with anybody else. But anyway, most people didn't dispute Sia's autism diagnosis. They just felt like it didn't change very much. This person actually said, Sia deserved all the backlash she got and then some. Being autistic doesn't make it okay, Sia, it makes it worse. But then on the other side of things, we have tweets like this. The irony of autism activists cancelling Sia for being autistic. Sia camouflaged so well she couldn't even spot autism in herself. So how can she accurately understand the autistic community spectrum? Now diagnosed, she can begin to understand herself and thus the autistic com. Like, sorry, she was cognitively blind to her autism. And as consequence, all of the colours of the autism spectrum, sheesh, she only just now got diagnosed as a woman with autism in her mid-late 40s. Give her a break. So basically, Sia only made an ableist, offensive movie because she was masking, which made her almost in denial about the autistic experience. And I guess somehow, in this person's eyes, made it impossible for her to humanize autistic people. Making a movie with a $16 million budget about autism was probably a good reason to research autism and, you know, speak to more autistic people. Part 3, what happens now? So does Sia's autism diagnosis mean that we need to forgive, that we need to give her some grace? Does Sia deserve a redemption arc? Does it change anything? Well, I personally wouldn't say that it makes it worse, as that one person tweeted. I feel like it's pretty neutral. I feel like it's the same as it was. I basically agree with this person over on Reddit. Good for her. Everything she did surrounding that movie still sucks though. Regardless of her own neurological status, she still knew very little about autism and very little about the autistic community when she made that movie. In fact, so little that they didn't know that they were autistic themselves. I mean, before I was diagnosed, would I have trusted myself to make a musical about about a high support needs autistic person? No, most certainly not. At least not without extensive research and, consulting the autistic community. Even now, I'd have to do the same thing if I wanted to portray an autistic experience that's very different to my own. I don't think when watching the movie you get the impression that Sia sees herself in the character of Music in any way. Music feels quite flat and one-dimensional as a character. Now, if you compare this to the author of the Geek Girl book series, which has recently had a Netflix adaptation, but the author Holly Smale has been diagnosed autistic herself since, writing the books. And because her main character in Geek Girl is so similar to her, she has now sort of retroactively diagnosed the main character. Smale wrote Geek Girl before she was diagnosed with autism and dyspraxia, but has retroactively described Harriet as having both conditions as well. She says the team behind the show were incredibly supportive when it came to setting the right tone. That's for the Netflix show. I didn't have to worry too much because I'm autistic. I have my own life experience, so I can own that voice. Now, had Sia done the same? Had she made a movie based on her own voice, her own life, her own struggles, her struggles with her mental health, her struggles with addiction, her misdiagnoses with bipolar disorder, things like that, then maybe later on she could have said, oh, well, I've been diagnosed autistic now, and the character was, based on me, and I didn't know I was autistic at the time. That would have been a completely different story, and it might have been really great autism representation. I think, interestingly, the closest we get to that in this movie is the character of Zhu, the sister, the true main character of the story.
And poor Kate got the brunt of most of my, and can we do another take with you? Just look, because I think probably I knew that character the best in my head. I had that character she was so clear in my head. So poor Kate always got the most sort of notes and stuff.
She has the same battle with alcoholism, and she's presented as this sort of stereotypical manic pixie dream girl character. She wears quirky clothing, she has baggy t-shirts tucked into miniskirts, she shaved her head. She's chaotic and she's childlike and she's a mess, but she's still lovable. And one of the other characters, a neighbor, of course it's a neighbor, still falls for her despite her chaotic, manic pixie dream girl ways. So would I really be surprised if the main character, if Kate Hudson's character, was diagnosed autistic, particularly as she has an autistic sister? It's not that unlikely. I don't know why I'm speaking about these one-dimensional characters as if they're real people. Just bear with me. So I guess the moral of the story is write what you know, or at least don't write what you really don't know or aren't willing to take the time to know more about. So should Sia be forgiven? I think it would be a lot easier to do if she had removed the scenes. She said she was going to remove the scenes on Twitter. Autistic people notoriously do not like it if you say you're going to do something and then don't do it. So I don't know why she promised that if she couldn't keep that promise. I do think actions speak louder than words. I think it makes her apology seem hollow and like she just wanted to get everybody to shut up and go away and move on to the next scandal or whatever, and she would just, leave her movie as it was. I think, no matter what Sia does as an apology, I think there will be people who always kind of, want to remain outraged and say, absolutely, there's no way, there's nothing you can do to make this better. But I think a lot of people would be open to her growing and changing. It's just that she hasn't really demonstrated that to the autistic community at all just yet. And it would be great for her too if she could try and undo that harm a little bit. The autistic community, when you're first diagnosed, is such a great resource and can be so great for your mental health. I think there are even studies, that suggest it can be super helpful for autistic people who are late diagnosed to find community, and it's kind of sad that she sort of blocked herself off from that before she even knew. And I don't know, to be fair, how many of us were kind of ableist before we knew that we were autistic, How many of us did sit there and feel sentimental over movies like Forrest Gump and Rain Man and things like that, and think, oh, doesn't this make me feel warm and fuzzy? Wow, the way they struggle but still manage to get through the world really inspires me. I really have no excuse but to go for my dreams. It's just so normalized to think that way about disability in our society. Now, I do disagree with some people who act like her, being rich and famous means that she never struggles. I think it says a lot about, how a lot of people do view fame and being famous as this sort of utopian existence where all of your problems fall away, but we have a lot of evidence to the contrary that is not the case, that fame is not good for people. So maybe it's a bit problematic that a lot of people do think that way. Someone said, another celebrity who paid for a convenient diagnosis, in my opinion, F her, which again, it sounds like they're kind of questioning the validity of the diagnosis. She kind of sort of tried to pay her way out or something. In a blog post, someone else said, and that's where the problem is and why the autistic community hasn't forgiven Sia, despite despite the privilege her fame and fortune affords her, Sia is yet to own her mistakes or meaningfully engaged with the autistic community. I think as well as privilege, it's like power. She had a lot of power over, how autistic people are perceived. I think that's kind of what's so upsetting about the charity Autism Speaks as well, how, they have influenced the stereotype of autism so much, and most autistic people don't have that kind of, money and power behind them. Instead, despite all of the responsibility of her status, Sia is washing her hands of the issue, a privilege many autistic people don't have. Then it goes on, for a wealthy, white, award-winning artist like Sia, autism can apparently be a vague label of quirkiness. Sia used the word kook as well as on the spectrum when she kind of announced her autism on the podcast. For almost everyone else, autism dictates every aspect of our lives, often negatively, our relationships, our finances, our physical health, and mental health. I do agree on the spectrum can sometimes sound a bit like a euphemism. I do think when she was saying kook, she was kind of probably using it in a bit of a self-deprecating way. It would make sense that Sia might not be super confident to sit there and say, I am autistic, given the reception that her movie got. And I'm not sure autistic people are necessarily always best suited for fame. I mean, Sia describes fame as poison.
And then there's getting famous is, I think, a traumatic event.
What do you think? You've spoken quite a bit about the trauma of or the problem with fame, and that fame is a poison generally.
Yeah.
Do you believe that?
I do, because I'm still exactly the same person. I still have exactly the same insecurities. This has done nothing for me. I thought it was going to rescue me, and it didn't.
I agree that Sia does obviously have privilege, and particularly financially, but that didn't stop her from going most of her life without a diagnosis and being misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder and being medicated for that misdiagnosis. She may have had the money in the bank for a diagnosis, but she didn't get one. She still suffered from this bias in medicine. Nobody told her that she was autistic. And again, her success doesn't mean that her life is perfect and she's just fine now forevermore because she has money. Anyway, in a way, I think we can kind of count our blessings maybe that the movie was as bad as it was. It was so bad, and the representation was so over the top that even people outside of the autistic community, people who are not autistic, could kind of see what autistic people were talking about. It was released in 2021. A lot of people were at home, and a lot of autistic content creators were kind of like on the rise. Paige Liel made a video that has almost 1 million views. Chloe Hayden made quite a few TikToks. It got people talking about autism representation in the media, and it got people talking about autism in general. And a lot of these creators managed to grow their platform, and creators like Paige and Chloe helped me discover that I am autistic. So in a weird roundabout way, maybe Sia helped me to get an autism diagnosis, and then maybe Sia is the reason why I'm sitting in front of you today in a roundabout weird way. So I guess thank you, Sia. Thank you very much. So what do you think? Does Sia deserve a redemption arc? I don't like to ever think that anybody is, kind of beyond forgiveness, but I'm not sure she's done enough. I'm not sure she's done anything to kind of counteract the harm. But I do genuinely hope she's okay, and that having that autism diagnosis helps her going forwards. If you enjoy these kind of, autism representation, celebrity-related videos, I do have one where I touched on the comedian Matt Rife, who seems to really love talking about autism in his comedy. He kind of had like a rebrand at the start of the year, like, I'm gonna do offensive comedy now. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that one as well. Yeah, scripting these videos does take me a really long time. If you would like this content to keep coming, I'm so grateful to my patrons over on Patreon who enable me to keep on doing this silly little thing that I'm doing. If you are able to, and if you would like to, you are welcome to support me over there. We have a Discord server, so even if you join the lowest tier, which is $4 a month, you can be part of the Discord server, be part of the community, chat to other neurodivergent people who think they might be neurodivergent. There's also a load of exclusive content over there. I have one where I read Orion Kelly's book. There's me reacting to the weirdest stock footage, for example, that I found while making my videos. So if you've seen everything on this channel, you might enjoy the stuff over there. I also do like this autistic advice segment where I respond to questions and dilemmas and things that have been sent in by patrons. So yeah, feel free to check that out if you want to. You do not have to. There are going to be weekly videos on here regardless. If you haven't already, then do click the top link in the description and add your email address and see if you can get yourself anything for free from Bellessa. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video very soon. Bye.